Đánh thờ. Đánh người ông.
Where is this place?
Where is this place?
Don't you remember? You were in an accident. Diane.
What would you do if the night swallowed you whole, leaving you alone, desperate and on the brink of losing everything you hold dear? In this heart-wrenching story, Diane wanders the cold, empty streets searching for Towen, only to fall asleep beside a filthy trash heap, losing her last possessions to a silent thief. Meanwhile, Towen fights for his life after a brutal ambush orchestrated by his own mother, barely surviving thanks to the help of strangers. Will love and hope be enough to reunite them against the darkness? Stay with us, hit subscribe, and follow their gripping journey. Night had fallen like a heavy, suffocating blanket over the city, and the streets seemed endless, silent, and cruelly indifferent. Diem wandered through the dim alleys, her footsteps echoing softly against cracked pavement, each sound swallowed almost immediately by the oppressive darkness. The cold wind whipped through the empty streets, tugging at her thin jacket and chilling her to the bone. Yet she pressed on, driven by a singular, desperate hope to find Toan. Every shadow made her heart race. Every distant sound made her pulse throb with anxiety. She called out his name, her voice trembling, carrying both fear and longing into the night. But the silence that returned was deafening. Her body grew heavier with each step, exhaustion gnawing at her muscles, threatening to collapse her into the unforgiving ground. But the thought of stopping, even for a moment, was unbearable. What if Towan was somewhere nearby, needing her, calling for her, and she wasn't there? The very idea sent shivers of panic down her spine. She had nothing with her but a small bag containing the last remnants of her belongings, the few coins she had managed to save, her identification, and a few personal items. A fragile thread connecting her to a world that now seemed distant and cruel. Her stomach growled with hunger, but hunger was a small concern compared to the gnawing fear that Toan was in danger, perhaps even at this very moment. Eventually, her legs could carry her no further. She stumbled upon a neglected corner behind a run-down building, where a pile of refuse seemed to ride like a dark, grotesque monument to the city's neglect. She sank down amidst the garbage, trying to curl herself into the smallest possible space, a futile attempt to seek comfort in a place that offered none. The smell was sharp and bitter, but exhaustion made her numb to it. Her eyelids grew heavier with each passing second, the night pressing down on her, the weight of fear, loneliness, and uncertainty blending into a crushing pressure. Finally, she succumbed, drifting into a restless sleep. Even in her dreams, the night did not relent. Shadows moved just beyond the corner of her eyes, whispers of doubt and worry threading through her mind. The city seemed to mock her, indifferent to the desperation of one solitary girl who had wandered too far, who had loved too fiercely, who now lay unprotected and vulnerable. And yet, buried beneath the fear, there was still that fragile, stubborn hope that somewhere, somehow, Toan was out there, and that their paths might cross again before the darkness consumed them both. Diem's sleep, though heavy and numbing, offered no true refuge. In the shadowed corners of the night, a figure approached with silent, predatory steps. The cold wing that had once seemed merely uncomfortable now carried with it a sinister presence, brushing against her hair and tugging at her bag without her noticing. By the time she stirred, it was already too late. Her bag, the fragile vessel of her last possessions, her only link to survival and the life that seemed increasingly out of reach, had vanished. Panic clawed at her chest even before she fully woke, a cold dread spreading through her veins. She awoke with a start, coughing against the stench of the garbage around her, her body trembling from both cold and fear. Frantically, her hands searched the ground beside her, brushing against discarded bottles and scraps of paper, but her bag was gone. The coin she had counted so carefully, the small wallet she had clutched like a lifeline, all of it vanished into the night. She sat up abruptly, shivering, and called out into the darkness, her voice cracking with desperation. "No! No, no, no!" The sound of her own voice echoed back at her, hollow and pitiless, confirming the depth of her loss. Tears came swiftly, blurring the grimy world around her. She pressed her face into her hands, sobs racking her fragile body. Each heartbeat felt impossibly heavy, each breath like inhaling shards of glass. The loss was more than material. It was the annihilation of the small sense of security she had clung to in this unforgiving city. She had wandered through night after night with only hope to sustain her, and now that hope seemed to crumble, replaced by an all-encompassing despair. She felt small, invisible, utterly powerless against the cruelty that had snatched her last treasure in the silent shadows. Hours passed, or perhaps only minutes. Time had lost meaning, and Diem remained slumped against the pile of refuse, body curled protectively, sobs intermittently breaking the cold stillness. Her mind replayed the loss over and over, the bag, the coins, the few personal belongings that connected her to a life she had known. She felt as though the night itself had conspired against her, and every shadow now seemed alive with the threat of unseen dangers. And yet, through the anguish and the choking grief, a fragile ember of determination lingered. Somewhere beyond the darkness, Toan still existed, and she had to find him. The thought was a whisper against the roar of despair, a faint pulse of life amidst ruin. With trembling hands and tear-streaked cheeks, Diem rose slowly from the heap of refuse, her resolve battered but not extinguished. The world remained cruel and indifferent, yet her search could not end here. The night might have taken her possessions, but it had not yet taken her spirit, and somewhere in the shadowed streets beyond, Toan awaited, whether she realized it or not. Not far from where Diem struggled with the weight of loss and despair, Tien lay battered on the cold, unforgiving ground. The attack had been swift, merciless, a calculated ambush orchestrated by his own mother, who had sent killers to erase him from existence. Blood had soaked through his clothes, mingling with dirt and grime, and every breath was a jagged pain that tore through his chest. The world seemed distant, muted by the ringing in his ears and the shock coursing through his body. He wanted to call out, to scream, but his voice failed him, swallowed by the cruel night. By a stroke of luck, or perhaps fate, a group of villagers returning from late-night errands stumbled upon him. Their shouts pierced the stillness, startling the shadows that lingered nearby. Tien's eyes fluttered open weakly. A strong hand lifted him from the ground. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through his shattered frame, yet the relief of human presence, of knowing he had not yet succumbed to the darkness, was almost unbearable. They worked quickly, carrying him to a small nearby clinic, murmuring urgent words of reassurance, patching the worst of his wounds with trembling but determined hands. Even as the villagers tended to him, Tien's mind was a chaotic storm. His mother's betrayal burned like fire in his chest, mingling with the physical pain. and he found it hard to grasp that someone so close could orchestrate his near death. But amid the shock and betrayal, a single thought persisted: Tiem. Where was she? Was she safe? The image of her wandering alone in the night searching for him brought a fresh surge of anguish that threatened to overwhelm his fragile consciousness. He longed to see her, to hold her, to ensure that the woman who had risked everything for him was unharmed, yet he could barely lift his head without dizzying pain. Hours passed in a blur of antiseptic smells, hurried stitches, and whispered reassurances. Tian lay mostly unconscious, drifting between unbearable pain and fleeting clarity. Each pulse reminded him of his mortality, each shallow breath a reminder of the cruelty he had narrowly survived. And yet through the haze of blood and fear, a stubborn ember of hope refused to die. He had survived the night's brutality, and he would survive the days to come, if only to reunite with Diem and ensure that the darkness that had threatened to destroy them both could not claim what truly mattered. Even in his weakened state, Tien's spirit remained unbroken, a silent promise echoing through the sterile walls of the clinic. He would rise, he would fight, and somehow, against the shadows and betrayal of the night, he would find Diem again. And somewhere beyond the walls, under the indifferent sky, the city continued to breathe, unaware that two lives, intertwined by love and fate, were on the precipice of survival and reunion.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Lý Tử Diễm Review. Vậy là trong câu chuyện hôm nay của chúng ta thì Diễm đã phải lang thang ngoài đường để đi tìm Toàn, và điều đáng buồn hơn nữa đó chính là cô bây giờ không còn nơi để về. Đêm đến cô đã phải ngủ bên ngoài bãi rác để ngủ qua đêm, và một điều tồi tệ đã xảy ra, đó là trong lúc khi cô mệt ngủ say thì toàn bộ số tiền của cô mang theo đã bị kẻ trộm lấy mất. Liệu rằng Toàn và Diễm sẽ sớm tìm thấy nhau hay không? Tất cả sẽ được hé lộ vào các tập tiếp theo. Các bạn hãy bấm vào nút subscribe để đăng ký kênh, sẽ nhận được thông báo mới nhất về các tập phim sẽ được phát sóng hàng ngày trên kênh nha. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều. Thanks for watching. Bye bye and see you.